Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday weekly rankings here with Jim Coventry. We're going through quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends entering week 7. Of course, 2 teams on bye, Bears and Cowboys. We'll talk about the ramifications of that here in just a second, but excited to dive in this with you, Jim. And like I mentioned, with those bye weeks, Caleb Williams was a low-end quarterback 1 starter. Dak Prescott, if you started him like I did last week, was not a low-end quarterback 1 star, but most weeks has been up there. So I mean, the quarterback position, you're losing 2 people on just 2 buys. It's entirely possible that you're maybe considering some low end options. Is there one player that has rose into the low end quarterback 1 rankings this week that hasn't been there in past?
Yeah, I moved Geno Smith to quarterback 9 this week. He gets a lot of yardage, but if you notice, it's in garbage time that he's really been cashing in. For fantasy, he's lucky they're trailing late. They've had 3 bad games scripted, the Detroit game, the 2 after that. And so he gets enough done, but he only throws like 1 touchdown a game. But that said, in this matchup, it doesn't get much better because the biggest problem for Geno is pass rush. When he gets pressure, you just see the offense kind of like is stagnant. They're playing Atlanta. Nothing to worry about there. Even when they brought in Matthew Judon, I kind of said Judon's nice as a package of a pass rush, but as a feature of a pass rush, and it's been true. They get very little pressure. So Geno's going to have time to get the ball to his great weapons this week. I think that game's a shootout. Love Geno Smith as a top 10 option.
Yeah, that's a good one too. And we'll talk about the trades from yesterday when it comes to receivers. But there has to be a little bit of a bump up. Aaron Rodgers getting his best buddy, the over-the-shoulder Pat McAfee return of Davante Adams now, of course, going to the Jets. Again, we'll talk about the Davante Adams side of things when we get to the receivers. It matters for Amari Cooper, Davante Adams, those kind of guys. Quarterback, though, Aaron Rodgers, is he also in that low-end quarterback 1 conversation now?
He's close. He had been around quarterback 19 and 20 before the trade. I moved him up to 14. If they didn't play the Steelers this week, I would have had him higher. But the Pittsburgh's going to get pressure on him. Tyron Smith looks old. I hate to say it, but he looks like he really fell off. And guess who's probably going to be on that side rushing the passer?
I wonder if it's Mr. TJ Watt.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about that. So I think Rodgers gets enough done. You know what? The beauty, though, here was the beauty on that Monday night game before they got Adams. Todd Downing, they used some play action. They used some motion. They never used those when they had Hackett calling the plays, and you could automatically see the results. It was right there. The passing game was working in that game. Breece Hall was working in that game, and that was all it took. Just a little bit of a change from the garbage you're getting from Hackett. So Rodgers will continue to probably get those advantages. But yeah, so I have him just outside of 12. It's a tough matchup.
Well, you can always replace Tyron Smith with another one of the 2010 Packer gang and Dave Bakhtiari if they really wanted to go there. I know Jordy Nelson is still available somewhere on his farm if they really want to run back the whole squad for Aaron Rodgers and the friends and family group. With the New York Jets, we'll see if that matters from a win-loss perspective. I do think, as much as being a little bit snidey there, you're going to see Aaron Rodgers have a bit more of a fantasy bump up because no matter what, if you're targeting Garrett Wilson 20 times a game, fine, and you're going to have positive results. Alan Lazard, he somehow made fantasy relevant, even outside of that Hail Mary touchdown in the first half. But Mike Williams getting replaced by Davante Adams is a 1-for-1 trade, no matter what, positively for an offense. I do think Aaron Rodgers, especially with this chemistry, makes a lot of sense. Sticking in the quarterback news, and this got buried in the news cycle yesterday, but Russell Wilson expected to make his first career start for the Steelers. Of course, he had been the listed starting quarterback for Mike Tomlin and had been injured. And then there was kind of like let's see what we got with Justin Fields here. And I think it was that Cowboys game that effectively ended Justin Fields' starting tenure for the Steelers. He has been a good game manager, Justin Fields, certainly from a fantasy perspective. You've been happy to have him, but it hasn't really helped the offense. You could argue that's Arthur Smith. That's having only one receiver. That's the whole offensive scheme. But we're going to blame Justin Fields. So now Russell Wilson is your starting quarterback this week. Does that make Russell Wilson a quarterback starter for you? Or is it more like, the Steelers offense just kind of isn't very good?
Well, they're playing the Jets, and the Jets give up among the lowest fantasy points to quarterback in the league. Now, later in the week, we could change our mind because DJ Reed left last game with an injury. I don't know if that's going to cost him this week. Last week, their slot corner, Michael Carter, was out. So if they're without 2 of their corners, because realistically, I know they don't like to travel, but if they're without those guys, Pickens probably move Sauce. I would think any rational mind would move Sauce Gardner over on Pickens because you're not worried about the Van Jeffersons of the world beating you. Don't know if they'll do that. I think Wilson's going to get a little bit of a bump this week because I think he's going to come out guns a-blazing. I think he's going to come out, because he's trying to prove something.
Mhm.
So I think I have him as quarterback 17, which is going to be really high for him the rest of the year because he's normally going to be quarterback 24, 25 probably because this is a run-based offense. So this week, I'll give him a little bump because I think he gets aggressive. Freieremuth probably has a decent matchup. And like I said, it depends what they can do with Pickens, but he'll take some shots at Pickens. We'll see how that works. So again, not super aggressive on him. And Russ, that athleticism, that really isn't there anymore. He ran a little bit last year, but every year that's going to get worse and worse.
Yeah, and we talk about the Jets tackles, especially Tyron Smith. I think the Steelers tackles have played pretty bad. There was that one clip of immediate pass rush last week against the Raiders, and Fields evades it, then runs up field for 7-yard gain. Russell Wilson can't do that. I mean, like he can run circles around in the backfield all he wants, like the Seattle days, and that's not going to be a positive game script or a positive scenario for that Steelers offense. So maybe he's able to read defenses better, maybe able to make a check down. I think more of the football field will be open to throw to. I mean, Justin Fields, at this point, pretty famously seemed to only be able to throw to the sidelines, and that was because there wasn't any bad scenarios if he missed on a throw if it goes to the sidelines. So the middle of the field is probably more open. I'm not optimistic that this matters. The one area I'm interested in, we'll talk about more at the receiver position a little bit later. Russell Wilson, in my mind, was going to unlock George Pickens this year. Like if Russell Wilson was going to be your starting quarterback, the one thing that you knew he still had in his back pocket was that moon ball, a deep throw. And George Pickens did great last year, even without that, but certainly I would assume is one of the best beneficiaries of the jump ball, has the speed to get there. And I think Russell Wilson can make that throw. Maybe not the Jets this week, but that might be the one positive outcome with Russell Wilson fantasy-wise starting at least for a couple weeks, you'd assume.
Yeah, at least a couple weeks. It's going to be interesting to see if Wilson has time to throw those deep downfield passes because that line, like you said, they're battered too. They lost a number of people. They invested in the line, and injuries have really hammered them, leaving some of their worst parts remaining. Their center's been good. The rookie center, he looks like he's going to be a star for years, but there's not much else like you're intimating here. And really, Arthur Smith, when he has it his way, what he really wants. Think back to the A.J. Brown days in Tennessee when Arthur Smith was coordinating that offense. It was a lot of those play action and slants.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the passes he really loves. And so we'll see how that works. Because Pickens was actually a perfect fit for those because he is a great big bodied slant runner. We saw him take a couple to the house with Mason Rudolph last year. But that's, so if they can get that pass going, and I'm not sure that Wilson can, that would be awesome as well.
Well, and again, Fields could not throw in the middle of the field, or they didn't want him to. So, I mean, maybe there is. I've just assumed the Steelers' offense is bad because all the parts are bad, the scheme is bad, and the choices are bad. So you're going to have a bad offense. So there's a lot of the bad involved in that. But if it is, well, we couldn't really throw in the middle of the field. We were worried about Justin Fields making mistakes in that regard, and we're going to safeguard stuff. Maybe the offense does get unlocked a little bit. I thought the Jets played really inspired defense on Monday Night Football against the Bills, but they've been uneven at certain points this year. And we'll have to see the cornerback health for both those guys and if that will impact things. So, hey, reminder, folks, that we also have, a number of fantasy content on the site, but gambling content as well for every sport. NBA is only 2 weeks away. I love what Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha, Jason Shabilsky, Kieran Sprecher, they've been doing a great job getting us set for that. Obviously, WNBA just finishing up as well, too. We have NHL, I think either game starting or preseason. I'm forgetting what I'm seeing in the box score right now, but lots of other content outside of the NFL stuff. And of course, we're only in week 7. I mean, for us in the industry, I can't believe we're at week 7.
Right.
But for you, if you are 2 and 4 right now, don't worry. It's only week 7. We're going to get you there. We got a lot of fantasy content out there as well, too. You can see all of that, whether it be MLB, really, I mean, I think James Anderson already has his prospect rankings out, but we have the best ball stuff coming in January, February, NBA, NHL, NFL, rotowire.com/try. Gets you that 2-day free access to the site. No credit card needed. So you can look at all that stuff. Again, if you're just wanting rankings for NBA, for your drafts, whatever else, doesn't matter. We got you covered. rotowire.com/try. All right. I have not yet published my weekly, the big betting sheet where I go every game over under, every game against the spread. It will be published later today. One of my takeaways at the top was I really am not looking forward to week 7 football. There's a lot of games that I think are going to be good. We'll get to that in a second, but a lot of games I'm like, I have no idea. Like I didn't feel confident picking one way or another on a lot of this stuff. And in part it was because there's a lot of bad teams against bad teams, or like bad offenses against good defenses. And you're like, well, I don't really know how this is going to work. But there is a few good matchups. And for whatever the reason, The Super Bowl rematch is taking place on a late afternoon Sunday between the Chiefs and 49ers. And it's certainly a different Super Bowl. I'm sorry, it's definitely different than the Super Bowl with Isaiah Pacheco injured, Rashee Rice out as well, too. So I'll turn this question on running backs. I mean, what is Kareem Hunt going to do from a fantasy perspective? A lot of people probably have to start him. I mean, if you picked him up, want him off a waiver wire, were smart to get him when he was benched that 1 week before, or at least whatever it was, getting a game active, however they want to put it. I mean, Kareem Hunt has been a workhorse. So is he still in that category against this vaunted Niners defense?
Yeah, and the Niners defense is more of a name. They're not a good run defense this year. They've lost a lot of people to injury, and it's been a problem. Teams have been able to Kyren Williams dusted them a few weeks ago, but it's not just that. Teams are consistently running the ball on them. Well, here is the thing. Kansas City played last Monday night against the Saints, and the tweet I put up before the game was, I go, man, I can't imagine how much 2 and 3 tight end sets we're going to see. They use four on some plays. So basically, this is real simple. You put 3 and 4 tight ends on the field. Defenses are constructed to stop the pass. The players have gotten lighter over the last years. Like they're bringing in lighter players. So now if you're putting that much beef up on the line to run the ball, what is the defense going to do? It's not like you have all these, 280-pound guys on the bench you can summon. No, they don't exist. The linebackers and the safeties, they're smaller than ever because they have to defend the pass. And so the Chiefs are basically playing a math game. And they're just running the ball down their throats. And as soon as the defenses try to adjust and bring people down, well, there's an out to Juju Smith-Schuster, Travis Kelce, or tight end leak speed into the second level. And so it's very strategic. So Kareem Hunt, yeah, they're going to run the ball down everybody's throats because they're going to put so many bodies out there. What do?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was wondering if we were getting to a Jim Coventry get off my lawn type of thing. Back in my day, in the early 2000s, Brian Urlacher and Ray Lewis were built like real linebackers, not this Fred Warner guy. But no, I agree with you. The Niners defense is more on name value, and they've lost a few pieces in the interior defensive line as well too. It's it's weird to say, but the difference between 2024 Patrick Mahomes and peak Eli Manning isn't so much. I mean, like there's some mobility for Patrick Mahomes. It's the same thing, but otherwise Eli Manning, very famous game manager, Mahomes game manager things as well too, especially with the defenses presenting those 2 high safety looks. Like you just got to take the check down. You got to be smart. And if you make a play on 3rd down, extend it, whatever else, that's where the bread and butter is. And Patrick Mahomes is a fantasy asset, I think is effectively done, at least from a quarterback 3 or 4 perspective. He's well outside that quarterback 12 range, or at least I think on the cusp of it, which is not where you were certainly drafting him. That's not just the Rashee Rice injury, but it plays a part. And I think the scheme now, the Chiefs kind of saying, we're going to win games 23-20. That's our goal and expectation moving forward. Hinders things, and Kareem Hunt gets to benefit that a little bit. I was shocked. I like to review the data a little bit, and not that week 6 is a great time to do that, but it was like, I have some time. Let's look at this. The Lions have not 1, but 2 running backs in total in points per game that are within the top 8 in fantasy. David Montgomery has scored a touchdown in every single game this season. Jahmyr Gibbs has been fantasy relevant as well too. This is another great game. Lions versus Vikings. Everyone's going to be tuned into this one, at least from the NFC North side of things. As a Packer fan, I'm very interested. Vikings coming off a bye week. Lions coming off a thrashing of the Cowboys in which they try to throw 15 touchdowns to their offensive linemen. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen from this perspective. How do you see David Montgomery fantasy-wise, but I guess to a lesser extent, Jahmyr Gibbs this week?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Montgomery and Gibbs have done this without crazy volume. In the last 4 games, there's only 1 instance in those 4 games where either running back that went over that had 15 or more carries. There was a game where Montgomery had 23 against Arizona. In that same game, Gibbs had 16, but otherwise 13 and 11, 14 and 12, 12 and 12. So they're very evenly used. And actually, Gibbs is not being used as much as a receiver as we want. He had 2 games with no targets, but then he had a 7 and a 5. So we don't know what we're getting in that realm. So, but nonetheless, like you said, they score enough touchdowns. There's enough yardage to go around, and there's enough floor volume to keep them both very relevant. And what's going to be interesting now, I have them ranked highly this week because I first think Brian Flores is a great defense out there. And I know they have a little different personnel this year, but the divisional opponents have a little bit of an edge here because they've played against him twice already. So they know some of the general concepts he wants to go. And when they look at film, they can kind of make some very good assessments here. So I do think the Lions come in with an advantage. But here's the thing, and I'm going to flip this to defense for a minute. They lost Aiden Hutchinson last week.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense is done. One player, because that whole pass rush was him. They're playing all this press man coverage, and that was good because Hutchinson was wrecking, the offensive line, right, and other guys were benefiting. Now what's good? So what happened was Montgomery and Gibbs were getting a little more work late in wins, even though the carries weren't super high. Now these might be abject shootouts. Then Jared Goff had 25, 18, and 23 attempts last week. Those pass attempts may start going back up because that defense was playing better than it was last year. So Montgomery and Gibbs are still squarely in play because they're going to be on the field, and there probably are more passes to them as well. It's not grind down the clock stuff, but keep them as your high running back ones. Montgomery's just outside, like running back 13, little less involved in the pass game. So that's about the only thing. You're always expecting they score touchdowns, but you can't bank on it. But yeah, you keep rolling them out there. But the Lions are going to be a little different going forward without Hutchinson.
Yeah, I wondered if it would go the other way, that the Lions would effectively do what the Chiefs have been doing. Like, all right, we need to slow the tempo down. Like we can't make those big plays. We'll have a trick play every once in a while because Dan Campbell's awesome and we like to do that. But we have to kind of grind the clock out, knowing our defense, certainly after Aiden Hutchinson's out, is far more vulnerable. And maybe the Lions make a deal for a pass rusher, whether it be Hassan Reddick. Max Crosby went to Eastern Michigan for college. So there's then that rumor of, Max Crosby, the Raiders are already selling. I would be pretty surprised if Max Crosby gets dealt. But I mean, like they could make a move to get an additional pass rusher. Maybe that changes the outcome. But if I'm the Lions this week, and you do more of the film work than I do, and you also probably have more of the NFL concepts understanding, although I think I have a pretty good job. Brian Flores' defense for the Vikings is uniquely good because it's able to mask effectively what they're doing on a per play basis. Like that's one of the values that Brian Flores has provided. And he has the pieces like the Andrew Van Ginkels of the world that they've signed that can do a lot of different roles. So therefore a defense doesn't know what a tipping point is. Kind of like if Justice Hill comes out for the Ravens, the running, or they're likely passing the ball. Defenses have those tells too. But my understanding is Brian Flores has kind of had defense built with these guys that covers that. But by doing the masking the coverages and having in different spots, you are missing out a little bit on the run fits. And maybe that's a scenario where you see the running more. I'll be very curious. And again, I don't know the schematic stuff quite as well as you do, Jim, but have you heard that at all? Like maybe that the Vikings might be a bit more vulnerable against the run because they're covering that, and therefore the Lions might try to target that a bit more.
It's been funny because they've gotten better linebacker play than they expected. Their run defense has been very good. They have been very solid against the run. Now, again, you're facing an elite offensive line here, and I think that's something that goes underreported, that the defense is great, but when you have an offensive line that can basically move you, and that gives Gibbs and Montgomery an advantage. I think when you're talking about the overall picture here, the Lions, now that Jamison Williams is a big deal, they put so much stress on the defense because sure, you had St. Brown in the middle, a great player, but ultimately slot receiver, and he can hurt you. But how bad can he hurt you? But now having that play where if you put Jamison Williams underneath and you get him the ball in space, he can break your defense very quickly. It adds a unique stress. Speed. John Madden said it. The late John Madden, speed kills. That's never changed. And when that level of speed's on the field, so now even from the run game, they have to be cognizant when Jamison Williams goes in motion. Oh my gosh, what are we doing now? And that creates some run lanes. Believe it or not, you wouldn't think it creates some run lanes because there are people that have to be like on their heels instead of their toes because of that speed on the field. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun to watch this offense. I think they're at the advantage against the Minnesota defense.
It's a real X's and O's thing, which I'm excited for. I think the Brian Flores defense provides a lot of fun things if you just like watching football, watch schemes play out. You get that all 22 film after the next couple of days. I like tuning into that stuff. I like watching the smart people talk about it, and it'll be a really fun matchup. Those crossing routes, I think in particular for Jameis Williams, the speed factor, motion coming left, going right, then crossing all the way over. What are you supposed to do when the guy runs a 4.3 speed? Like Stephon Gilmore can't keep up with that no matter how good of a corner. So I'll be very interested to watch how that matchup occurs. We're talking about running backs, but this is overall geek stuff for the Vikings and Lions. Another good game. Again, there's a few on the Week 7 slate. Packers, Texans, and for whatever the reason, this is a noon game in Lambeau Field, and we saw the return of Joe Mixon. The Texans ran wild against the Patriots in Drake May's debut, and then Nico Collins out. We had talked about last week, well, maybe Xavier Hutchinson was going to be more involved. Spoiler, he did not. Thankfully, hopefully no one listened to my advice and played him if you had to in deeper formats. Stephon Diggs did his thing. Tank Dell got a bit more involved. That might change this week. I mean, by default, you are going to be more pressed, I would assume, against the Packers offense than you would Drake May and the Patriots. However, it is clear now at this point, the Texans want to win football games by running the football. It's Joe Mixon, it's Dameon Pierce, whatever else. We are going to limit the opposing team's touches or opportunities because we're sitting on the ball and making smart and effective plays. That is how games are won in the year 2024. It does not sound sexy, but that's how your best teams are doing it. So we talked about the Chiefs just a bit ago. We know the Packers defense is better. This is not Joe Barry anymore, allowing 400 yards per game, but we know they're a bit more vulnerable against the run. So it feels like one of those where, well, the Texans want to run and the Packers aren't great at stopping it. What will this look like for a guy like Joe Mixon?
I'm going to say one thing about the Texans first, though. They've given the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs, and they face Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, James Cook, Travis Etienne, say what you will, DeAndre Swift, and, well, then Antonio Gibson, not so good. Yeah. But that said, they are not giving up a lot of fantasy points to running backs. So
hold on 1 second, because I do want to talk Josh Jacobs, but
that's what I am, though. We're talking about the Texans defense against him. Yeah.
Well, I was saying I want Joe Mixon. Like, where is Joe Mixon this week against the Packers defense?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I messed that up. No, we'll get to Josh Jacobs because I think that matters too. But we have a little bit of time. Let's talk about more because it's going to be a good game. Joe Mixon, I would assume, gets more work for the Texans against the Packers defense, right?
Oh, yeah. You were framing out the Packers defense. My fault. Yeah. I know that's the show sheet. I was thinking ahead.
No, I messed you up. That's my fault.
Yeah. All right. So Joe Mixon in this game, he's getting downhill. And that's something that Joe Mixon has always been able to do. And this is where it's going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. It's a non-conference opponent. I think that helps a little bit. The conference opponents, especially those that have seen Nico Collins on the field and kind of understand what he is, they know you could play this team a lot differently with no Nico Collins on the field. Because realistically, Tank Dove, you got a safety over the top. Now I really think he's neutered. Stephon Diggs, great player, but ultimately he's not a big play guy anymore. So I think those conference opponents are going to start to say, you know what? We know CJ Stroud's really good, but you know what? Let's try to make them in obvious passing situations. I don't think the Packers are going to do that. These non-conference teams don't view it, they don't see it the same way, I don't think. So I think they come in, and I think Mixon gets it done here. I think Mixon is the engine to the offense, and they'll throw passes to him as well. Mm-hmm. So I really think this works out for him. And and he's always obviously a threat at the goal line. Dameon Pierce maybe 9 carries last week. It was a blowout if I remember right. But it was Mixon doing like all the work. So yeah, Mixon is right there, and you're starting him as a high running back. I have a running back 6 this week.
Yeah, that's the wild part. And I thought, again, if the Texans are going to run the ball, and again, no Nico Collins means you by default need to do that more. The Patriots game a little bit different than I would assume will happen in Lambeau come Sunday, but you're running the ball more. That would then, I would believe, put the Packers offense on their back foot. They really haven't. I mean, I certainly were against the Vikings a couple weeks ago, but for the most part, against these bad teams, whether it be the Titans, Colts, Cardinals, they've been able to dictate how the offense or the other team has to respond. And I don't know if that will occur this time. So as a result, and this is where I was leaning to with Josh Jacobs, he probably does have a little bit less fantasy value this week if you think the Texans can establish their identity and what they want to do in offense.
Yeah. So back to what I was mistakenly talking about earlier. Yeah, for Josh Jacobs, it's not the best matchup. The Texans have had a very active linebacker group. Their interior defensive line has played well. So overall, this isn't going to be a great running matchup for Jacobs. Jacobs getting volume. You definitely are going to be able to start him without any concerns. I have him just in the, I have him at the running back 2 range, high end running back 2 range. And that's what he'll get for you. And hey, if you never know when you get a touchdown. It's only been once in 6 games. Those are fickle, right?
Right.
And if this game finds a way to start shooting out, and don't discount the Packers here because Lassiter, the one corner, was out last week for Houston. If he's out again, their free safety Jimmy Ward is out. This could end up being a shootout if those 1 or 2 of those guys is out again. And the Packers offense is great. And if they're scoring points, well, you might get the ball near the goal line. And we're going to see one of those games where Josh Jacobs gets 2 or 3 touchdowns. That's going to happen. And so you start him as a running back 2, but you think, yeah, this game could shoot out. Like I said, so if it does, you have upside for Josh Jacobs built in, I think.
Yeah, the over-under was at 47, and first glance, I thought that was a little bit high because I assumed, like we talked about with Joe Mixon, the Texans are going to be able to establish the run a little bit more. And again, this Packers defense is way better than past years. Like I'm very happy as a Packers fan that we have a different defense that can be better against the run. But even better against the run for the Packers is like, oh, they only allowed 150 yards per game as opposed to 300, whatever it was in past years. the Texans should be able to do things. Joe Mixon should be able to do things, and maybe you're playing at a pace. The game is playing at a pace where you can't necessarily have that. Josh Jacobs is, I think, PFF's 6th overall running back. Like, he has played really well. I would almost say you could buy low on Josh Jacobs a little bit, unless you're in leagues with me. I'm not selling Josh Jacobs at all. I think he's been totally fine, but it might not be the week where he falls into the end zone. That's been kind of the reason why his fantasy production's been lagging behind. He's been very good. A lot of holdings, calling plays back as well, too. I think reading the offensive line really well. Josh Jacobs has been, in my mind, as advertised. It just hasn't quite resulted in the fantasy production as of late.
The receiving numbers, Joe, the receiving numbers haven't been. He's getting some targets. True. A 28-yard game was his biggest game in the last 5, and that's 28-28. But Josh Jacobs is capable of more. We saw him with the Raiders. We saw him with 40, 50-yard receiving games. Those weren't uncommon. So I think also you take that low receiving volume, and that hurts him too, because he is a versatile back.
Yeah, and they did that with Aaron Jones. I mean, that was one of the, it's a 1-for-1 replacement, but younger. Josh Jacobs might be a bit better runner, but Aaron Jones is a better pass catcher, but not to the extent that, like, you'd assumed it'd be in that 35, 40, 45 range of receiving yards, and it hasn't got to that point. Now, I mean, the Packers offense has been really good getting Christian Watson open, or Dobson a touchdown, or Tucker Kraft scheme things. They might scheme things for Josh Jacobs one week. It really does seem fickle in a positive way, that any single week, a different player for the Packers could pop off. Frustrating fantasy wise, but this isn't like the Raiders offense, where I guess one player one week could pop off, because that's how NFL works theoretically. A little bit different scenario for the Packers. Real quick reminder to folks that Jonathon Brooks, of course, the first running back drafted, Panthers 2nd round pick, has not been eligible to practice the past weeks. That's why he has not played. He has his practice window activated this week. That does not guarantee he will play. We'll likely find out Saturday. Technically, the teams we'll find out Friday. Is that what
he's not playing? Real quick, okay. The Athletics Joe Person writes that he doesn't expect the Panthers to rush Brooks back. Week 9 seems to be the realistic target.
Wow, week 9. Huh. Okay, so I mean that's great news. His practice window is open. That means 21 days. Like, a team has 21 days to ramp up a player. Week 9 would be the very end of that spectrum for the Panthers. Now, I wonder if it's because Chuba Hubbard has been excellent, but if we are believing that report, I think we probably should. It's all wheels up again for Chuba Hubbard for as long as he can have him.
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard has just, look, volume every week, every show. I'll say it once. Volume's king in fantasy football. Last year we had Rachaad White. Last year for a while we had Chuba Hubbard. Well, we have Chuba Hubbard again. And I don't know what Jonathon Brooks' full role is going to be when he comes in. I don't know if it's that it's going to be 50-50. Maybe Brooks is so good and he comes out and they waited till he was 100% healthy, and maybe it becomes 80% Brooks, 20% Hubbard. I don't know how that shakes out. But Hubbard, and I always rank him a little lower than I probably should. I have him at running back 19. I could flip him with James Conner this week. I definitely probably should do that, because the Chargers are playing good defense. I could flip that, but I can't put him above Jordan Mason. And if James Cook plays, Tony Pollard gets the Bills that can't stop the run, save their lives, J.K. Dobbins. So it's hard to move him higher than that. But that's strong running back too. You're starting him, obviously.
Right.
And, if you're loaded running back, you're using him as a flex. So, yeah, just in Washington, they lost Jonathan Allen, their great defensive tackle for the season.
Yes.
That was one of the stalwarts of their defense. And so a defense that wasn't great against the run, now they're significantly impacted. So, yeah, keep rolling Hubbard out there, because, again, when they fall behind, which in this game they probably do, guess who sees pass targets?
Yep, Chuba Hubbard. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like reverse here for the Panthers. Derek Brown out for the season. Their stud nose tackle, middle defensive line for the Panthers. Same thing for the Commanders, losing Jonathan Allen. That's a big blow to a defense star. He wasn't good. So, play Chuba Hubbard everywhere you can. There's probably room next week, Jim, to talk about the Buccaneers backfield, because if we see Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker, or one of the two, get explosive again, if Rachaad White is healthy, there's a conversation that needs to be had with the Buccaneers backfield. But right now, in my mind, we're doing this on a Wednesday. We don't have enough information as to what Rachaad White's status is going to be, or how the Buccaneers operate. So I'm tabling that. We're tabling that for next week. But I do want to get into those trade conversations, whether it be Amari Cooper, Davante Adams. I'm sure you covered it ad nauseum on Twitter, at Jim Coventry NFL. or probably at least 4 or 5 different videos now at this point on the RotoWire YouTube channel. Because I know you have a lot of that breaking news. You can find all that on our RotoWire YouTube channel. We have content going up regularly. Again, Jim is reacting to all that sort of stuff. He probably did a video on Cam Akers going to the Vikings at this point, even though that would be a non-news item in my book. If you haven't found the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel yet, I don't know if this video is playing there right now. Please consider going there, searching it up, Google, whatever else. Subscribe. If you could like the video, it would make me look good. Jim's already a star. I need the likes, at least for myself. And click the notification button so you don't miss any of the content that we have on the site. So let's talk about those trades. In my mind, Jim, it was a foregone conclusion Davante Adams was going to the Jets. We might have even mentioned that last week. The odds were like plus 165. It might have been put your mortgage on the line, Davante Adams going to the Jets. I didn't see any sort of scenario that wasn't going to happen for that trade. And then when Aaron Rodgers threw Mike Evans directly under the bus after Monday night's loss, I said, oh, the trade's happening this week. Lo and behold, the report was that trade happened 30 minutes after his press conference was done. I'm not sure if you followed that storyline, but Davante Adams in New York for the Pat McAfee show right behind Aaron Rodgers' shoulder. The trade had already been happening, and the hamstring/trade meinitis disease is now over with. Davante Adams seems like he will play. I think this is going to be we're going to force feed Davante Adams the ball to make this trade look good. And it'll be Aaron Rodgers at the helm making that decision happen. What is your expectations for Fantasy Value for Davante this week?
Davante Adams is obviously clear of his hamstring injury. He sounds like he's very well healed right now. Not like a good trade to heal up that hamstring, right? I have Davante Adams fairly aggressively at wide receiver 12. I know normally he'd be like a top 4, top 5 guy, but still coming in. I mean, look, he's going to get those automatic passes from Rodgers, but there are still some things. Garrett Wilson's still going to see the ball. Look, we saw Allen Lazard getting some games with 8, 9, 10 targets. So there's stuff to go around. And I don't think it's going to be every pass is going to Davante Adams and we're going to ignore Garrett Wilson. Aaron Rodgers is not a foolish man. He knows that Garrett Wilson offers him a lot, and especially the coverage that Adams will see now. And that's going to make the looks a lot better for Garrett Wilson. And Breece Hall is going to be heavily involved here. And so overall, Adams, I have as a top 12 guy. I just don't think he's seeing that 32% target share that he saw with Rodgers. I think we're looking more like 25, which is still very high, but he's not like that top stratosphere look.
Well, let's play this out because I think it's important. Let's just say Rodgers attempts 36 pass attempts weekly, maybe a little bit less, like in the 32 to 36 range, which is about NFL average. And if you have Breece Hall, that's what you should be doing. I want to be clear. Like if you have an electric back like Breece Hall, you should not be throwing the ball 50 times like it's Joe Flacco with the Browns last year. That's not what you should be doing. So let's have 32 to 36. I would assume something like 10 to 12 targets for Davante Adams on a week-to-week basis. Maybe it's in the 6 to 8 range, depending on the matchup, but 10 to 12. Garrett Wilson gets in that range too. So maybe it's 22 of your projected 36 pass attempts by Aaron Rodgers go to those two receivers. That by default, we're just doing math here, is going to hurt Allen Lazard. I mean, like that is 14 targets left over for Tyler Conklin, Braylon Allen, Breece Hall, 1 or 2 to a random receiver, and then Allen Lazard. So as great as Allen Lazard has been fantasy-wise, and he still has that relationship with Aaron Rodgers, if you think Garrett Wilson is a thing and is a good player, and I do, then Allen Lazard is the biggest loser of this Davante Adams trade by far.
100%. And just to back up some numbers on you, when the Packers time together between Adams and Rodgers, it was 10 to 11 targets a game. I'm looking at every year game. Like it's right 10 to 11. This might be 9 to 10 because Garrett Wilson's there. Because the number 2 was always like a sketchier player,
like Allen Lazard.
Like Allen Lazard. So it's a small take, but it counts. 9 to 10 is different than 10 to 11. It sounds stupid, but it is. So again, Adams may not be the top 3 wide receiver, but he might be on the season top 8 or top 9. And nobody's going to argue with that because that you drafted him to be about that, which, you're expecting crazy volume in Las Vegas. Now he'll get better quarterback play here. But Garrett Wilson's the tough one because as his many games, he had 60 yards. Then he had the 22 target game 2 weeks ago. And then last week he had the bigger game. I think seeing 60-yard games, those are going to be way more the norm than him going higher than that.
I do think Davante Adams will be more used in the red zone too. That's the one relationship where you could see Rodgers looking for Garrett Wilson a little bit more, but that's 7+ years of I know exactly what Davante Adams is doing when he does this juke, and I know right where to put it against the defender. Davante Adams, he's not scoring 10 touchdowns in 12 games, whatever. But like, I think Davante Adams is probably very close to going above the league average, if not more so, in touchdowns, because the Jets' offense is moving the ball. I mean, they have been moving the ball. Breece Hall getting more involved certainly helps things too. All right, then, and this is also kind of an end zone related situation, but then there's Amari Cooper being traded to the Bills. Maybe that shouldn't have been a surprise to a lot of folks, but Bills needing, evidently, a number one receiver, acquire Amari Cooper from the Browns, who are effectively tanking. You normally want to try each other backup quarterback. Well, the Browns can't do that for other reasons. So it's still a bad offense, still a bad team. Have fun in Cleveland. Amari Cooper can have fun in Buffalo with Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, MVS. MVS, of course, gets cut. It's a win from a football perspective that Amari Cooper is taking snaps away from Mac Hollins and MVS. Yes. That helps the Buffalo Bills football team. But I want to push back just a little bit on the people who are uber excited about Amari Cooper, and they probably should be. But when is the last time we've seen a midseason trade actually have fantasy value for the receiver position? You could say Christian McCaffrey, and like, yep, I get that. Running back, Kyle Shanahan. When is the last time a receiver midseason trade? We've had the Emmanuel Sanders, Chase Claypools of the world. Those have been fine. Mohamed Sanu, right? I think the Patriots got him from the Falcons. 2018, when Amari Cooper was traded from the Raiders to the Cowboys, is the last time a midseason fantasy trade has had had a major impact. I think Amari Cooper helps the Bills win football games, but I'm not convinced it's going to matter as much fantasy-wise. Well, Where are you at with this?
Joe, you just made a point against yourself here. You proved the point that Cooper is going to be just fine. The players you mentioned that didn't pan out were all marginal players. When a superstar, and I made this point with like full season trades and free agents, when we see a marginal receiver come over, a lot of times that first year doesn't work out. But when a superstar comes in, they're already a superstar. They get open. They're reliable. Quarterbacks quickly look to them. They want to run the offense through them. And so that's why when a player like Cooper was traded many years ago, he was successful because you already are moved in as the number one option in the offense. And it's some people say there's a playbook thing. When you're a number one receiver, it don't matter. Run a 9 route, run a 7 route, run dig 15 yards. They could be so less complicated because these superstar receivers, they already get the nuances. They get how to read the defense. So this is all going to be fine. And Josh Allen needs somebody badly now. The separation those receivers were getting was just horrible. And Cooper has become, honestly, a much better player since his Dallas days. In the last couple of years in Cleveland, he became a more versatile receiver. He was getting open downfield. He was doing better in the intermediate area. He became more complete. And that's the version Josh Allen's getting. And right now, we see it. The Bills are in some of these passing situations, and Josh Allen just doesn't see enough to get the ball into somebody. Cooper is going to give him some breathing room.
We saw a 10-game sample size of the Joe Brady, Josh Allen offense have a alpha number one receiver. Fell off the planet.
Declining number one receiver, though.
It hasn't declined in Houston.
He's a possession guy. He's a possession guy in Houston.
That's what you're describing Amari Cooper to being for the Bills.
I just explained. He wins downfield. He wins intermediate. He wins everywhere. Stephon Diggs had shrunk down to being just a short and moderate intermediate guy. He lost a lot of what he had. He was a player. That's why they got rid of him. I mean, he's in decline, right? No, Cooper's playing the top of his game right now. We saw last year 2 straight 1,200-yard seasons. I think it was 1170 one year, but this guy is at the top of his game, and this is a completely different animal, Joe.
I'm nervous. I guess I will push back on that idea. I think that Joe Brady's scheme does not need a number one receiver. Stephon Diggs was being utilized as such before Joe Brady took over, and then they didn't need Stephon Diggs, and they were still winning games. Amari Cooper is going to make the team better. He will be an option, especially in the red zone. I think that's the biggest beneficiaries where it's Mac Hollins getting slant routes at the end of the game. Amari Cooper is going to win those. But if you are drafting Amari Cooper in the 4th or 5th round, thinking you're getting number one target offense, I just don't think that's happening as much in this Bills scheme.
I will say one more thing. I said this before the season. I said that defenses, once they realized the Bills, and I was on multiple records saying this, once the defenses realized the Bills had nobody who could stretch the defense or nobody that they would fear in any way in a passing game, they would load up the short and intermediate area. They would tighten up the windows, and Josh Allen wouldn't run for a ton of yards, and he would have a hard time with passing yardage. It was exactly the way I called it. Exactly. They realized, and again, Diggs wasn't that last year. They need somebody that can tilt the defense. And honestly, with the arm Josh Allen has, Josh Allen doesn't want to throw 8 and 10-yard passes all day. If Josh Allen has a chance to air it out, Josh Allen is one of the great deep ball throwers in the game. We could disagree on this all day long, but I'm telling you, the problems of the Bills' offense are they couldn't stretch a defense. If they run Cooper on short routes, they're going to be in the same problem they were in because they are just continuing to allow defenses to bring everybody in, and that is what's killing the Bills.
Well, I mean, yeah, we'll definitely see. I would assume you'd run deeper routes. I'd also assume the defense would want to take that away. I mean, like making
that opens everything else up.
Right.
And Cooper can still win. But you have to throw those balls to Cooper. If you just send him there and don't throw him the ball, well, then until you make them respect it, and then if it's working, they're not going to say, you know what, it's nice. We're not going to throw you the ball, even though you're not. They're not. It doesn't make sense. It's not like, all right, you're winning down here, but we're not going to throw it to you because we want to keep you guys underneath involved.
Right.
It was like the Randy Moss when he went to the Patriots thing. It was like, oh no, Tom Brady spreads the ball. I go, are you crazy? When Randy Moss is doing this downfield, waving his hand, Brady's throwing him the ball, and he like fell in fantasy drafts, and I scooped him up, and 23 touchdowns later. Not that Amari Cooper's getting 20.
I was going to say we're making a really big leap. Let's go. All right, Amari Cooper, Patriots, Randy Moss.
Right, but it's just my point was that when you have somebody that is able to win, you don't say, oh, we're a spread it out team, we're not involving you. That doesn't make sense.
Well, if you are of the opinion of Jim, and you always should be, I feel like Jim is right on this stuff 95% of the time. There is an opportunity to buy low on Amari Cooper, and if you are on my side, I'm selling high. This is the best time fantasy wise for Amari Cooper we've had all season, and you might be able to extract a name that you certainly wouldn't have been 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're going to really find out what this means. I think it makes the Bills better. I'm not sure what it means fantasy wise. And if I'm a minority of this, that's normally a good thing for everyone else. The minority is not a good spot for me this season. And then real quick, because again, I don't like talking about the tight end position all that much. It's just stupid and boring and frustrating a lot. But Marvin Harrison joined a list of a number of injured players that left the game early. Chris Olave, Dallas Goedert, Travis Etienne. I did see a lineup where all 4 of them were on there, and Dak Prescott was the quarterback. It was posted on Twitter. That was like 7 fantasy points total between all starters. It's brutal. If Marvin Harrison plays, I think that's the if on this. Let's assume he's active. It's not always an assumption with the concussions. Assume he's active. How do you anticipate he does against this Chargers defense on Monday Night Football? I mean, this is the lesser of the 2 games, Chargers Cardinals on the double Monday night header, but I think it'll be really interesting for matchup wise for Marvin Harrison.
So first of all, the Chargers, they do have injuries they're dealing with. This Asante Samuel's on the injured reserve, and that potentially helps. It better help, right? Christian Fulton's not a good corner on the other side. He's questionable as it is. They got Jasir Taylor, the slot corner. Not that we're going to see Harrison in the slot a lot.
Right.
So overall, I think that kind of helps. But look, it hasn't been going on with Marvin Harrison right now, and they're not enough targets. It's just not working for him right now. And right now, I have him ranked outside my top 20 wide receivers at wide receiver 26. He got touchdowns earlier in the season. He hasn't gotten them recently, and obviously like you said, he got knocked out of the last game. We had a 36-yard game, a 45, and a 64 in his last 3 full games. That's not getting it done. And is it his fault? No. I think whatever's going on in the Arizona offense. Last year, Drew Petzing coached up beautifully. This year, there's no flow. Right. There's nothing consistently going. They have these pieces, but they're not making them work together. And so until they fix that, it's just like Marvin Harrison is like a wide receiver 2 at best, but he may even be closer at wide receiver 3. I might have him too high in my ranking.
Yeah, you probably can't bench Marvin Harrison if you have him. But it's a frustrating spot right now. I mean, it absolutely is for that Cardinals offense. Kyler Murray was one of those that you're like, not you specifically, but a lot of people in the fantasy industry, myself included, well, he's quarterback 8, but the upside could be quarterback 3. The answer for that was Jaden Daniels, which I know I got wrong, but that was the hope for Kyler Murray is that, oh, well, he's not running at all. Like other than that one long touchdown against the Niners, we're not seeing Kyler Murray run, and maybe that adds an element to the offense that they're missing if that gets more involved. I've been disappointed.
Joe, he actually, until last week, his rushing totals 57, 59.
Oh, I was expecting more.
80, 83, 45. But if you take those 4 games, I mean, that's like 1,000-yard pace. That's like Lamar Jackson pace.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's buoyed by the one long run, which is bad tackling by the Niners.
But the 45, 59, and 57 to start the season, that's 1,000-yard pace.
Yeah, you're right. You're
right.
right.
On the
I'm always bad at math, and that's a good. Yeah, that's fair. I assumed even more, or maybe like more, it's more weaponized running, like more, here's a read option. Let's scheme things around, not, well, the pocket broke down and then Kyler Murray got out for 6 yards on a 3rd and 10. That's kind of, and I saw that again a lot in the Packer game, but whatever. Yeah, I'm lower on Marvin Harrison as well too this week. If you were like me, you were probably looking at the RotoWire picks and props app and thinking, hey, Kyler Murray's rushing total against the Packers. Packers defense is always bad. Definitely take the higher on that. Well, I've been wrong. But I think you can look at that the RotoWire Picks app this week, and it offers tons of recommendations and different fantasy pick'em and player props on all platforms like Prize Picks, BetMGM, and more, and also covering every sport. We talked about MLB and NHL earlier in the show. It's free to download on the Apple and Android stores. Sign up within the app for subscription to unlock all the features. Or if you're an existing RotoWire.com/DFS Picks subscriber, you get instant access right away. There, I think if you do the 48-hour RotoWire.com/try, you would not be able to, but you could see the Picks app on the site when you do the RotoWire.com/try. And if you like that, then you can just go ahead and fire up the subscription for it. Again, apps available on the Apple and Android store. Check it out now. Search RotoWire Picks in the App Store today. I think this is our final week with Doug Peterson as the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. They didn't want to pay the flight to send him home early. So like, hey, okay, Doug, you're in London one more week. You'll come back with the team. Maybe you stay there, whatever you want to do vacation wise, but this is it. Against the Patriots, Jags favored by 5.5 in this one. And I was like, I think the Patriots are going to win.
Oh my gosh.
Drake May looks good. I think the Pats outright win. The vibes are very bad, despite what Shad Khan said, owner of the Jags last week. I'm pretty sure Doug Peterson is done. Evan Engram has benefited, though, from this offensive scheme and returned to the field last week and ended up being a revelation right away, despite missing the past four weeks. So is Evan Engram a lock and load in your starting lineup?
Yeah, even last week in the Start Sit Show, which you could catch the Start Sit Show on RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube on Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, and I give you the why behind that. But with Evan Engram, there wasn't a lot of why last week. He was coming from the injury. I go, play him. He's ready to roll. So go ahead and use him. And I think you just consider the same. Is he going to have down weeks? Yes. But New England, middling matchup against the Titans. Jabril Peppers has that legal issue. They're free safety. That's a big problem. They have injuries in their linebacker core as well. So look, Evan Engram, he had 10 catches last week, 100 yards. Maybe he doesn't match that. But yeah, I have him as my tight end 6. His floor should be good. Again, you never know when a tight end doesn't get the ball, but you realistically expect he's going to be a big functioning part of that offense.
Your why is, well, there wasn't any other tight ends that are actually good in fantasy. So play Evan Engram because it's better than doing Juwan Johnson or somebody like that. Noah Fant, right? Just play Evan Engram. Your overall tight end 6 in fantasy today is Pat Freieremuth, who has had all of one game, like over 12 fantasy points this season. But because tight end position stinks and we're all injured and unhappy with things, Pat Freieremuth has been consistently average. And that is a win for fantasy folks out there. I had made the case at the start of the year that Russell Wilson as your starting quarterback helped George Pickens. I was drafting George Pickens everywhere because it was presumed Russell Wilson was your starting quarterback. And then B, it was going to help Pat Freieremuth because we know Russell Wilson likes to check down to the tight end and will make that safe throw. Freieremuth, again, has tight end 6 right now. Is it safe to say that he is a must start again this week?
Yeah, I mean, he's been a floor play, right? But he scored touchdowns. He gets 4 targets most weeks. Like Joe, you said, I think he gets a little more this week. It may be 6, it might be 7. He does have 1 7-target game, but I think he gets that here. And the Jets, it's not a death matchup against tight ends. So I think overall, given that you don't like this, it's probably a low-scoring game. But yeah, I have him as a tight end 10. I moved Mark Andrews ahead of him. We can fight about that all day. Yep. But he's still tight end 10. Yeah, he's a solid starter. Like you've mentioned it, you want a floor in the tight end. And I think you have one with Freieremuth. And could he do more? Yes. Could he break something down the seam? Yes. Can he score a touchdown? Yes. So I think with the floor, you do have some built-in options for a good game as well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's the floor plays at tight end is the smart play at this point of the year. Maybe things will change. It seems like the position's moving a bit better. Mark Andrews got more involved. Kincaid's still been a bit of a disappointment, but Trey McBride seems to be solidified as a top 3 or 4 option that you're investing in. Travis Kelce, same spot too with Rashee Rice out. So we'll have to see as that goes on. If anyone emerges I've been making the pounding the table that Ben Sinnott, that 3rd round pick for the Commanders, would be that guy, would be this year's Sam Laporta. It just takes one Zach Ertz injury and the Commanders offense would have that. But until that point, we're just waiting this out. We're waiting out with a lot of floor plays at the tight end position. Again, Jim, I haven't seen a lot of the comments today because I think we're not connected to the YouTube channel, which is my fault, but Jim does a great job at the start sit stuff every Sunday. You and Alan Sosowski are on Sirius XM as well, too, effectively answering all the daily lineup and starts the questions on channel 87 too. But if you can also at Jim Coventry NFL, if you have start sit questions. I'm trying to do a content thing, Jim. So I'm pushing this out now. I want to know if you have made a trade for Amari Cooper or Davante Adams, or if there is a trade for those two in your league. My theory, my hypothesis is that no one actually knows the fantasy value of Amari Cooper. And I know I could just go on Yahoo and look at a bunch of these different trades, but I want to hear from you, the listeners. Have you seen an Amari Cooper or Davante Adams trade played out in your leagues? If you have, at me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter, trying to make some content stuff out of that and see where it goes. So thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back again next Wednesday for more of these weekly rankings.